Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN AM for Thursday, April 16th, 2020. And here are our top stories. Will imports and robots push older workers into non-traditional jobs? And how or will those older workers find retirement and health benefits? Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Matthew Rutledge. He's an associate professor for Boston College, and he's also a research fellow for the Boston College Center for Retirement Research. Matt, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Look, I'm a big fan of the work that you and BC do as it relates to retirement research. Really privileged to have you on. So I want to just jump right in. I mean, one of the things that really, one of the research items that really interested me when I saw, checked out your latest newsletter was the fact that the question that was posed: will robots? And I think we're all worried about this. We've all seen Terminator. We've all seen the big, the movies out there. Will robots displace older workers? And I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but really, what was the thesis of the article, the paper that you wrote?
So what we were looking to do is to decide basically the two big questions we hear about the decline of the middle class, the increase in inequality, the fact that capitalists are winning at the expense of workers, are that robots are coming to take our jobs, that increased automation has made it so that a lot of the middle skill routine jobs that people were used to doing just aren't going to be there in the future and already are starting not to be there. And also that competition, especially from China, with cheaper labor available elsewhere in the world, is going to make it so that the kinds of jobs that people had in manufacturing, any sort of assembly, even sometimes repair, just aren't going to be there. And that could potentially extend to even service jobs, like helplines and call centers and that sort of thing that might be farmed out to other parts of Asia. And so we wanted to look, at least so far, does that do those pressures, import competition, especially from China, and automation coming from increased use of robots in manufacturing and in other positions, have they started to push people towards what we can call non-traditional work? We're using non-traditional work to kind of stand in for a bunch of things. One thing that I think that we are increasingly hearing is that a lot of people are no longer employed by the company that they actually do most of their work for. So, the example that actually was in a recent New York Times article is that Kodak used to hire a bunch of people to be their custodians to make sure that the building was clean. Nowadays, they don't hire those people directly. They hire a company that comes in with their contractors to actually do the cleaning of their factories or their offices. Another option is that a lot of workers are classified as independent contractors when they should really be considered employees. That would include all sorts of benefits, including some legal protections and things like unemployment insurance eligibility. There's also the possibility that people are increasingly engaging in gig economy work. We've especially seen that during the COVID-19 pandemic, where there's been a lot of actually even labor action on the part of people at Instacart or Amazon that have been classified as independent contractors or have been trying to do a gig economy work to be treated more like people that are going to be around for the longer haul that the companies actually have to start caring about. And so all that stuff, I think, is probably increasingly on the rise, but it's actually proven to be really hard to measure in the data because people don't always know how to classify themselves. They don't know how to answer a question like, are you an independent contractor? Well, they might give a wrong answer about that. They might think they're an employee. This actually happened to my wife a few years ago. She thought she was an employee, and it turns out she was an independent contractor. And she was an attorney. She should have known better. So this is the kind of stuff that we don't necessarily need to rely on the data to measure. Instead, what we used is just something that's a lot easier to measure, which is, does your employer offer you health benefits and a retirement plan? That's a pretty broad measure. That's something that people have a really good grasp on, but it's something that basically those two characteristics are the things that we would think of as having a good, solid job with an employer that's going to have a relationship with you, one that's going to want you to be around for the long haul.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we I mean, I'm almost 50 years old. I'm 47. You can't tell because I have no hair, but I have graying beard and other places. But, I think as you mature, a lot of people are concerned about this. And we have seen people necessarily people perhaps needing to work longer, Matt. Mm-hmm. And, they're relying on staying in the jobs that they have. And if they are pushed out for whatever reason, say the job's eliminated, it gets outsourced to either a domestic U.S. company or, in the case that you're talking about, custodial work, or goes to China or somewhere else, they're left with doing nothing or having to find some other work. I think it's very scary. It's a very scary proposition for many Americans.
Yeah, I think a lot of the motivation for this work really came from some pushback we were getting. A lot of our research from the Center for Retirement Research is pushing the idea that people are living longer now, they're living healthier now, they're better educated, their jobs are more conducive to aging. So why don't people just work longer? If they do, a lot of our data is suggesting that people are actually much better prepared for retirement than they currently seem like they are. But the pushback we're getting is, okay, that's great, but what if nobody wants to hire me? What if my employers don't want to keep me around? What if they don't want me at those older ages? How am I supposed to continue to work if there's no jobs available for me? And so increasingly, a lot of our work over the recent years has been in detecting, whether there's discrimination against people at older ages, whether there's an opportunity for people to switch into new jobs that are more conducive to aging. We've had some work on that. And this project is looking at whether non-traditional work is either replacing those kinds of traditional good jobs that people are used to having, or providing an alternative to people who actually want flexibility or want autonomy. From what we've seen so far in our work on trade competition and automation is that it seems like trade competition is not really pushing people into non-traditional work so far, but automation at least seems like it might be. That it is the decreasing availability of things like manufacturing where automation has already replaced them, and probably along the lines of the office workers and other people that have been replaced by software that might be able to do the kinds of routine work that they used to do in their jobs, have probably already started to push people into these jobs that have less stability and feel a lot more precarious to people. And that's especially true at older ages. Yeah,
and I really believe. I mean, I think it does a disservice. You talk about discrimination, age discrimination. Mm-hmm. I think an organization, I understand the yearning to get younger because it lowers the overall cost in terms of employment and benefits. But I think there's something lost when you lose that experience. As I always used to say, or still do, I'll still say it, you can't train experience. That experience of that, I like to build teams. I would think you'd want to build teams as an employer with all different types of people. Why? Because you get diversity of opinion and you get diversity of experience. And there's a lot of things that a more mature worker, I'm not even going to call them older, they're more mature, they have a lot of experience, can teach the younger generation. And I think that makes an organization actually better than if you just look at just the outlay in terms of benefits and cost.
Yeah, you mentioned experience. You mentioned, the knowledge that they might have built up over the course of their career. Also, during the Great Recession, or as the Great Recession was just starting to kick off, the Center for Retirement Research did a survey of employers, and they found other really good qualities that they were looking for in older workers. Things like loyalty, accountability, that they were actually going to get their jobs done, that they were going to ask for a lot of accommodations. They were generally going to be just solid workers who were used to getting the job done in a good way. And so that's even on top of the gains that you get just from the fact that you've been around for a while. I think the qualities that previous generations might have had in a little bit more abundance than some of the stereotypes about more recent generations are the kinds of things that I know that employers are going to want to do. As we move towards our recession, and we're probably in a recession already, I think it's going to be increasingly important for employers to keep that in mind as they start to, come out of their caves a little bit and start looking to hire people back, that it's not worth just hiring the younger people with the lower healthcare costs, like you mentioned, but also that diversity of the workforce so that they can get that experience and accountability from the older crew, but also the creativity and the flexibility from the younger crew. It's worth having all of that within your workforce.
Yeah. And last question for this segment. Do you find in terms of the research that mature workers, older, more mature workers are able to adapt to learning new skills? I would think, look, I'm always trying to learn new things. I talk to my mom, I talk to my dad. They're always very creative and inquisitive. I think people want to learn new skills. I think people, it just takes a little bit of time to kind of recalibrate and learn, for example, technology. But I think they can do it. I think we can do it.
I mean, today's 50 and 60-year-olds, they're not the ones that, not the 50 and 60-year-olds we had 20 years ago. That group, that cohort that was older in a generation ago was people that just never had the experience with computers. By the time computers were around, they were well established in their jobs. They may not have ever had it integrated into the kinds of work that they do. Today's 50 and 60-year-olds might have grown up with those in school, might have actually had that hands-on computer training right from the beginning. Now, it might have been punch cards instead of, big gigabyte or terabytes worth of big data, but it's still that familiarity with technology. I think is something that's just a little bit different about more recent generations, which means I think that scariness of technology is just not something that's going to put off today's mature workers.
Yeah, and by the way, I grew up with an Apple II and a TI 99.4a, and I could code in BASIC, and I could use Logo. Go check that out, kids. So I want to go to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about his research with older workers. We're going to look at retirement and healthcare coverage. So stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
The windows on our homes, they protect us and the ones we love, but they do much more. At Renewal by Andersen, making your home more comfortable is at the center of every window we make. It's why we custom build our windows in America and install them in as little as 1 day. It's why we build our frames with exclusive Fibrex composite material that's 2 times stronger than vinyl. It's why our glass helps keep your home warmer in winter, cooler in summer, and quieter all year long. It's why we stand behind every window with a 20-year limited warranty. Why not help lower your energy costs while giving your home and family the best? Call 1-800-835-6525 to schedule a free in-home consultation. Buy one, get one at 40% off with this special offer. Plus, get special financing with no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest for 1 full year. Renewal by Andersen, the better way to a better window. Call 1-800-835-6525 now.
Welcome back. We're talking to Matthew Rutledge. He is an associate professor for Boston College, and he's also a research fellow for the Boston College Center for Retirement Research. Matt, thanks so much for sticking around this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate it. And you covered in the first segment, we talked about the incredible research that you and the center are doing on non-traditional jobs for mature workers. Let's focus on those important things like retirement and healthcare and other voluntary, involuntary benefits or mandatory benefits. What can you tell us about the pursuit of those items for more mature workers?
Well, the way we're defining non-traditional work, if you didn't see the first segment, we were talking about the fact that, it's hard to define independent contractor or gig economy job or contract firm employee. All that stuff I think is a little bit hard for people to answer. And so what we use instead is this idea that you have a job, but you don't get employer benefits for health or retirement from that employer. So that means, okay, well, then people are going to require, or probably, health insurance coverage. Where are they getting it from? Where are they getting the opportunity to save for retirement in a convenient and tax-preferred way? And so basically, we looked for those alternative sources of coverage for both health and retirement benefits, or health and retirement, health insurance and retirement benefits, just to see where else they could be potentially getting it from. And it's kind of a tale of two stories here. On the health side, they actually end up largely getting health benefits. Only about, well, I shouldn't say only, but about a third of people in these jobs that don't offer employer benefits do not have health insurance at all. So about a third are uninsured. But a lot of them are able to get insurance through employers. Those employers, though, happen to be their spouse's employers. Or a former employer, either retiree health benefits or COBRA coverage that you can get for the first couple of years, the first year and a half after you leave your job. And so they're able to sort of piece together those alternative pieces of health insurance coverage so that they aren't completely out of pocket on all health care that they might get. Also, public benefits actually really are important. I think what we are finding is that the states that adopted the Medicaid expansion and that started running their own health insurance marketplace for the individual plans saw greater increases in coverage rates than the states that opted not to expand Medicaid or just use the federal exchange for the individual plans. And so the workers in those states just had more options available to them and were less likely to be uninsured. On the retirement side, actually, it was a little bit more difficult for people to find an alternative to the 401ks that they might have gotten from other employers. Spouses don't seem like they save more in their 401ks if they're married to a non-traditional worker. So that means that the spouses aren't really, as a family level, they're not making up for the lack of retirement savings that people might have lost out on because of the lack of a 401k. And people just don't save in IRAs. That's something that people tend to use IRAs just as a rollover. It's basically their past 401ks. They don't tend to save directly into IRAs because it's a lot harder to do. You have to do a lot more work yourself. You don't necessarily get matching contributions to be able to build up your savings in a faster way. There's not somebody holding your hand to actually get you to make sure that's done. And so at least on the health side, I think people are largely going to be able to find alternatives. Mm-hmm. But on the retirement savings side, I think people are really at risk of falling behind if they're working in these non-traditional jobs. And that's something where a lot of state policies or federal policies could do a lot better job making sure that people are behind. Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think that our show, and I know you do a lot of work, obviously, in research on retirement, the goal is for retirement security. And what we want is people to be able to save, and they need some type of vehicle that is easy to do. And the 401k or the 403b or the 457b, depending on where you are in the sector of the in what sector of the economy, because that you had those code sections. I mean, they provide an alternative to save tax deferred generally. I mean, unless you use the Roth feature at a very higher rate than you would in an IRA. It just is much more advantageous. A lot of states have done some work here, Matt, and I know you've covered this, and maybe not necessarily in the recent research that you've done, but states like California, Illinois, Oregon, they have laid forth programs like Cal Savers and Oregon Saves and others to lay the groundwork. But it really kind of bothers me that people don't have, especially mature workers who are in non-traditional jobs, don't have the ability to put the same opportunity to put money away at the same rate. That's disappointing. And I think ultimately, if people can't save, they're going to get money from somewhere. So you're just shifting the liability somewhere, whether it's off the employer because we went away from pensions, or to to public options. I mean, somewhere that liability gets shifted.
Yeah, it's always a challenge to get people who are already fairly far along in their careers, who can see retirement on the horizon, to make sure that they have enough resources to be saving for retirement. Even in a 401k world, you have that much less time to be able to build up that savings to allow it to appreciate, to be able to sort of deal with the ups and downs that we've seen over the course of this year in the stock market, for sure. The catch-up contributions in 401ks and in IRAs are a great way to actually allow for more people to save. But in point of fact, that especially in 401ks, most people aren't maxing out their 401k before they're 50. They probably can't afford to do so after they're 50 either. So catch-up contributions probably aren't the answer. That's something that's mostly going to benefit higher income people. IRAs, it's a little bit easier to max out what your contribution would be on a tax-deferred basis. And so those catch-up contributions, I think, are a little bit more helpful in IRAs, where I think you're maxing out at something like $7,000 now, and you could potentially go to a couple more thousand, I think, with the catch-up contributions. So that's something that could actually be helping people in their 50s. There's definitely some possibilities that the Social Security system could potentially be more generous. It could be especially helping people at the bottom, where there's more progressivity of benefits, a greater encouragement in offering retirement plans to make sure that people are taking responsibility and saving for themselves, pushing people to retire later into making sure that they actually have those jobs available to them, is something that you can't beat that in terms, like, there's no savings rate. The savings rate to be able to be comparable to just delaying retirement by a year or two, it would be off the charts, nothing that anybody's going to be able to hit. And so I think there's no easy answer to making sure that people are prepared for retirement. It's kind of a patchwork is really needed. All of the above is the way that we should be approaching retirement security.
Matt, does recent events, as we're talking, it's Tuesday that we're chatting, and we've gone through a lot of market volatility. You referenced it in some of the comments you made, but does the pandemic, the issues that small businesses, which are the biggest employer and one of the biggest employers in this country, the challenges that we're having many people laid off, does that shape or make you at all adjust some of your thinking on some of the research that you released early on?
Yeah, I think we may have gotten a little complacent with almost 10 years of job growth, just sort of assuming that there would always be more jobs available, opportunities to stay in the workforce, opportunities to feel comfortable enough to actually contribute to that 401k or to the IRA. I think we're seeing a reminder that recessions happen, and sometimes recessions happen quite suddenly. And 2 months ago, we seemed like we were quite comfortable, that things were just hopping along, and now that's definitely not the case. I think right now our primary concern is just to make sure everybody's actually healthy. I think the very older workers that we're concerned about, or those mature workers, to use your terminology, might also have chronic conditions that might make them very vulnerable to, in the short term, not necessarily getting through this pandemic or getting through this in a productive and healthy way. But then once we're past that, I think it's going to be really worth thinking about our safety nets, making sure that people actually aren't feeling the full consequences of the risk to fall back on in case the timing of their retirement, the timing of their health decline, the timing of their spouse's health decline, the timing of their grandkids being born and them wanting to be part of that it's not so vulnerable to the downturns that they might see in the market. I think making sure that we have, a good unemployment insurance benefits, a nice easy cushion for people to potentially leave the workforce more gradually if they would like to. All of that, I think, is going to be very important. And unfortunately, we're in for a tough couple of years, and that's if we're lucky. And if it's more like the Great Recession, it might be more like a tough 5 years or so. So let's hope it's more of that V-shaped recovery than the long checkmark shaped that we just saw.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned here for public policymakers, individuals, and corporations. Matt, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for joining us in the program. Great research, and we'll look forward to having you back on the program very soon.
Great. Thanks. Anytime.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a financial topic or someone of interest that you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Attention! The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has officially authorized new benefits that Medicare Advantage plans may include. To get the benefits you deserve, you can call the Medicare Coverage Helpline.
Hi, I'm Joe Namath. If you're on Medicare, this is important information. I called the Medicare Coverage Helpline and they instantly looked up my coverage. In this one simple call, they offered to enroll me in a plan that includes rides to medical appointments, private home aides, doctors and nurses' visits by telephone, and even home-delivered meals. The plan also includes dental, vision, hearing, and prescription drug coverage, all at no additional cost.
Don't delay. Call to see if the new benefits are available in your area.
Call the number on your screen now. It's free.
Call 1-800-757-1451. That's 1-800-757-1451.